Hey everyone, it's TK Friday. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of mask calculators in the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. These powerful tools can seem a bit tricky at first, but stick around and I'll show you some amazing ways to add, subtract, and intersect masks for incredible targeted masking. Let's unlock the magic of mask calculators together. Stay tuned. It's TK Friday, and we're going to have some fun today with mask calculators in the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. I love mask calculators. I have 3 different stock images. You can download these images and try this out. I have PDF notes for you, so that's going to help you out. Don't be afraid of layer mask calculators. They are amazing tools, and I'm going to show you some interesting ways that we can use calculators to really target our images to get really precise adjustments, and that excites me, and I hope it excites you. By the way, if you don't yet own the TK9 plugin for Photoshop, I'll have a link in the description below to take you over to Tony Kuiper's web store. Use my promo code DK15, save 15% off your entire purchase. There's a bunch of free panels and things you can pick up over there as well. And also check out Sean Bagshaw's excellent courses. You'll save 15% off of those. Pick up the TK Magic Mixer. You can do black and white conversions and work with color images with it. It's really great, but there's a lot of great stuff over there. Don't forget, use my promo code DK15, save 15% off your entire purchase. When you use my code, I make a small commission, and you're saving money, and you're supporting the joy of editing with Dave Cully, and for that, I thank you. Well then, let's get started. Now, I picked out 3 different stock images, and don't forget you can download these images. I have links in the description below. I was looking for images that I could use some really more sophisticated calculations to really show you the power of the TK9 mask calculators. Now, we do have 2 calculators in the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. We have a layer mask calculator. You'll find it in the TK9 combo or CX panel. And we also have a mask calculator in the multi-mask panel. Today I'll use both of the calculators, but I'll mainly be working with the one up here in the multi-mask panel. So this video will be a deep dive into mask calculation with the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. What I want to do with this first image, I want to darken the sky a little bit, but I don't want to darken the lighter areas of the moon. And I want these craters to go slightly darker. Layer mask calculation is the way to get that done. And the second thing I want to do is darken the foreground here, but I want to mainly pick out the darker tones and let the lighter tones get less of a darkening effect. And again, we'll need mask calculation to get that done. Let's start out with darkening the sky a little bit. This is step 1 if you're following the notes. For the first step, we want to come to the combo or CX panel and look for this button right here. Hold down your shift key and click it once. And what you'll do is save a sky and foreground out as a channel. We're going to need those. And I like to call this setting ourselves up for success when we save out channels of selections that we'll be using throughout an edit. And now what we want to do is come up to the multi-mask panel and click on the luminosity mask button. Now, if you'll note, lights 1 is targeted. Here's lights 2, lights 3, and so on. These are dark tones over here like darks 1, darks 2. But remember, I want to darken down the light tones a little bit. And lights 1 is targeting the area I want. But notice how this moon is really light. It will really get darkened down, these really light areas in here. And I want to protect that from happening. And this is where a mask calculation comes into play. Let me show you. Now, what we're doing here is creating a layer mask. And remember, in a layer mask, white reveals and black conceals. And then the various darker tones conceal more or less, and the various lighter tones reveal more or less. All right, we have lights 1. Now we're going to click this button here. This is your mask calculator. And what I want to do is subtract. Let me click the minus button. And what do I want to subtract? Well, I have these really light tones in here I want to subtract out of this mask. So we're going to come back and click on the luminosity button. And now let's try to target the very light tones. So let's go to lights 2. Let's go to lights 3. Let's go to lights 4. And notice now we are targeting these very light tones. And I'm really interested in these super light tones in here. And you'll note I am using lights 4. So I'm subtracting this out of my Lights 1 mask. That's all I'm really doing. We need to make a calculation. So click equals, and now you'll note these are those very light tones, these darker areas up here, right? Because I subtracted those out of my Lights 1 mask. So when I go and darken up the sky, these areas will be protected. And that is the power of a mask calculation. But I'm not done yet, because remember, I just want to darken the sky, but this mask includes the foreground area. It's dark, but it will still get darker when I make the adjustment. So I need to get rid of it. We'll use another mask calculation to do that. On the multi-mask panel, click on the mask calculator again. Now, I need to get rid of this foreground. I can either subtract it from the mask or I can intersect it with the sky. They'll both give me the same result. I'm going to intersect, so I'll click the X, and that's for an intersection. Now, if you recall at the beginning, I saved myself out a sky and a foreground channel, which I called setting myself up for success, because what I'm going to do now is come up and click on this button right here for my channels. And I chose intersect, right? So I'm going to click on sky because I want to intersect the sky with that mask. And you can see the sky is selected, all this white up here. Now all I need to do is click the equal button. And now you notice the foreground is out of the mask. It's totally black. And there is my sky. So here is my mask. Isn't that cool? So now that I have this Lights 1 mask with the lightest lights of the moon protected, I need to output this. Now, if you look in this area right here, see all these buttons in here with the black surrounding them? These are your outputs. I want to output it to a brightness contrast adjustment layer, and that's this button, so I'm going to click this. And now you'll note I have a brightness contrast layer with that mask on it. And now for the adjustment. I'm going to take the brightness. If I drag it to the right, I'll lighten. If I take it to the left, I'll darken. And I'm going to take it over to right there, a -57. Now let me shut off this layer. Here's the before and here's the after. But you notice the light areas stay light. Some of these craters get slightly darker. Let me shut this off. Here's before and here's after, but that brings those out. I really was only protecting the very light areas. And so that looks much better. And now we need to work on the foreground, and I'll show you how we do that next. For the foreground, I want to target the darkest shadows and bring those down, but also some of these lighter tones, the way the mask will feather, will get toned down a little bit in a very nice way. And let me show you how we can do that. Now, mask calculations can be used with any of the masks up here that we can generate with TK9. I'm going to use another luminosity mask, so we'll click this button. Now, I'm targeting darker tones, so I'm going to click on Darks 1. That gets all these tones in here pretty evenly. Here's Darks 2. See how this narrows down? And now let me click on Darks 3. And you see this area right here? It's the lightest, so it'll get the strongest effect. The other areas will still get darkened, but they won't get darkened as much. Now what I want to do is refine this mask, make it a little bit lighter. So what I'll do is click on this button here, and this opens up levels in the properties panel. And what I want to do is take this highlight slider and drag it to the left. See how that whole mask is getting lighter? I'm going to drag it over to like right there. But see, this area gets light. This will get the most adjustment right here. These other tones will darken too, but not as much as the lighter area. Well, when I lighten that up, you notice I have some area in the sky here, so we need to get rid of that. And this is where the mask calculation comes in. So what we're going to do is click on our mask calculator. Now, I can either intersect the foreground or subtract the sky. It'll do the same thing. This time I'll subtract, go up to my channels and click this button, click sky to subtract, and then simply click equals. And just like that, we have a mask that only targets the foreground. And now I need to output this mask. I'll click this button to output it to a brightness contrast adjustment layer. And now I'll take the brightness slider and drag it to the left over to right there, a -42. And let's work with the contrast. I want to increase the contrast a little bit over to right there, 16. Now let me shut off this layer. Here's before, and now here is after. Well, that was pretty easy, but do you see the power of the mask calculator? It really helps you to target the areas of the image you want, and it'll make your edits stand out from everybody else's edits. in a very good way. And now let's move on to the next image, this deer image. What I want to do in this image is darken the shadows of the deer a little bit and then use a gradient to darken the bottom of this image, but it'll go through the deer, so we need to protect the deer. And then the third thing is to darken some of these light grasses around the deer without affecting the deer. And this will all involve mask calculation. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me comments. And if you want to see more of these kind of deep dives into mask calculation, let me know in the comments section below. The first thing I want to do is just darken up the shadows on the deer to bring out some contrast. Come over to the Combo or CX panel, hold your Command or Control key down, and click on this button to select the subject, and it will save it out as a channel. Then come up to the Multi-Mask panel and click on the Luminosity button. I want to target dark tones, so I'll click on Darks 1. Click on Darks 2. These lighter areas represent the darker shadows of the deer, and that's the area I want to target. This time, instead of using this mask calculator, I'm going to use the layer mask calculator found on the Combo or CX panel. Now, we can get the same result using this mask calculator or the layer mask calculator, but I just want to show you there's more than one way, as we know in Photoshop, to get the same thing done. And that's the same with the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. I have this Darks 2 mask. I need to output it. I'm going to output it to a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to click this button. And now you can see I have a curves adjustment layer with the mask on it. And if I click this button on the Combo or CX panel, we can see the mask. Now all the light areas will get dark if I change the blend mode from normal to multiply, which I do want to do, but not yet. I'll click this button again and go back to the image. Because if I change this to multiply right now, not only will the shadows on the deer get dark, but the rest of the image that is targeted will get dark. So you could change this to the multiply blend mode now, but I'm going to wait. On the Combo or CX panel, click on the layer mask calculator, click on subject, and now what I want to do is intersect the subject with that layer mask. So click X, and now the subject has been intersected. And now if we look at the mask again, if I click this button right here, you can see it's been intersected. Pretty cool. Click this button again, we see the image. And now click the multiply button on the Combo or CX panel. That darkens the shadows. Now that's way too dark. So come to the layer opacity, and let me go ahead and pull this back to right there, 60%. Let me shut this off. Here's before, and here's after. Next, I want to close off the bottom of this image, darken it up a bit, but I don't want to affect the deer. So what we do is hold your Shift key down, click on the multiply button, and what we get is something called a multiply brush. This is new to the TK9 plugin for Photoshop in version 3. It's a curves adjustment layer in a multiply blend mode with a black mask. And this is great if you ever want to add a gradient. Next up, click on your gradient tool. See this drop down? Open up your basics folder. If it's not open, just click on the little arrow here and click on this last swatch, black to white. And what I like to do is put this in the reverse mode. This makes sure I have white to black here. And we want to click on linear gradient. And then what I want to do is click and drag a gradient kind of on an angle and something like this, but it's getting up into the deer. You see that? If I shut this off, here's before and here's after. It's darkening up the deer, and I don't want that. It's very unnatural. Now, one thing I want to say before the next step, make sure you have the gradient just the way you like it, because we're going to alter this mask and we won't be able to go back and change this gradient without destroying the mask, and we'll have to start all over again. So make sure you got the gradient just the way you like it, and you can pull back on the opacity of the layer if you need to, but I'm going to leave this up. I like it dark, just like this down here. We need to subtract this deer from this layer mask. So we need to use the layer mask calculator for that. So we're going to click on the layer mask calculator button, click on subject, and then click minus to subtract it. And if we look at this mask by clicking the double arrow button, we can see it is subtracted. But there's an issue here. Photoshop, when it selected the deer, missed part of the leg, and see this little black right here? This is a piece of grass, which I don't want. So we can fix that, and I'll show you how we can do that. Let's go back to the image view by clicking this button again. And if you'll notice on these paint swatches, I have a white brush here. We need a black brush. I could click this curved arrow to flip the swatches, or type X to get a black brush, or click on the black brush button on the Combo or CX panel. Make sure you're at 100% opacity. If not, type your 0 key. And then with a nice soft edge brush, make your brush small and just paint over this area. And that'll fix that mask right up just like so. And now we need to take care of this grass did not get darkened. So what we'll do is click on the double arrow again. And what you need to do is click on the spot healing brush. It's got to be the spot healing. It can't be the remove tool. It doesn't work, but the spot healing does. And just paint over this like so. And that fixes it right up. Click this button again and we're back to the image view. Let me shut off this layer. This is without darkening the bottom of the image, and this is with. Pretty cool, and I like that. One final thing we need to do, and that is darken some of these lighter grasses, which are drawing our eye around this deer, but we need to protect the deer. Let me show you how we can do that. We're going to use the gradient tool again. So again, I'm going to hold my shift key down and click on the multiply button to give us the multiply brush. Click on the gradient tool. It's set up just like before, but this time click on this button for reflected gradient. And what we want to do is click right here and drag up. And we can see the gradient on there. You can see the darkened area, so we can see the area that we're hitting. And then I can pull this down a little bit and, maybe target this area right in here. But you see we have the deer in here, which we need to subtract from the mask. Now, it's important, again, to make sure you get this gradient adjustment right, because once we start to alter the mask, we'll lose the ability to readjust. So we want to make sure we get it right. Okay, next, come up to the multi-mask panel and click on My Channels, because this is really cool. I don't know if you know this, but you can select the layer mask, which is this mask right here with that reflected gradient on it. So click layer mask, and you can see there's our reflected gradient. And now let's click on the layer mask calculator. We're going to click subtract because we want to subtract the deer out of that mask. And now we'll click My Channels, Subject, and now subject will be subtracted. Right now we can see the subject, and we don't have to worry about this area that it's missed because I'll be targeting very light tones, so we're good. That's darker down in there, so we don't have to worry about that. And now click equal to make the calculation, and you can see the deer is subtracted out. We're not done with mask calculations. We need to target those lighter grasses, so here's what we do. Click on the layer mask calculator again. This time we want to intersect the light tones of the grasses into this mask. So click on the X to intersect. And now let's click on the luminosity mask button. And now we need to target these light tones. So we're on lights 1. Let's try lights 2. And let's try lights 3. See, lights 3 targets these tones really nicely. I can refine this a little bit. So let's click on the levels button, and in the properties panel we can see our levels, and I want to lighten up these light tones. So what I'm going to do is take this highlight slider and we'll start to drag it to the left to right about there. See how it really lightens up those tones? And now we click equal to make the calculation, and check it out. We've nicely targeted just those light grasses. I know this is a pretty complicated mask, but we can do these really complicated masks and really target the areas that we want, which is really powerful. And now we need to output this mask down to this multiply brush layer. So how do we do it? All we need to do is click this button right here, and it applies that layer mask right there. And now look at the grasses back here. I'm going to shut this off. Here's before and here's after. See how it just dims those down? That's probably too much, so just take the opacity and just pull it back. We could take it the whole way off and then just build it up slowly and stop where we think. And I may come up here to maybe right around there, 78%. So let me shut this off. Look at these grasses. Here is before and here is after. But that's the power of the TK9 mask calculators here in Photoshop. Before I go on to the last example, let's do a before and after. So on my combo panel, click this button. We started here and now we end here. We darkened off the bottom, gave the deer a little bit of shadow contrast, and we darkened down the light areas of the grasses around the deer. I have one final example, and that is these hot air balloons. Now, what I want to do with these hot air balloons is I want to target red and I want to target yellow. And with one saturation adjustment, I want to bring up the saturation of those two colors and maybe slightly lighten those. Let me show you how we can do this. We're working with color. Let's come up to the multi-mask panel and click on the color mask button, and let's target red first. I'm going to target this tone right here and click OK. And now we selected red, but we've also selected a lot of color out in here, which I don't want because there's some reddish type tones that will not look good if I increase their saturation, so I want to knock them out. But we can refine this mask. I won't even adjust this brightness slider. I'm going to go right to the levels adjustment and click this button. And what I want to do is drag this highlight slider over to the left to lighten everything up right around here. You see how I'm targeting all that red? But I don't want these other colors in here that have some red in them. So what I'm going to do is grab the polygonal lasso tool. So I'm going to click this button right here, and I'm going to click right here, click here one time, come down here and click, and then click here. I find this polygonal lasso tool very satisfying. I'm just going to click over here outside of the image and come the whole way up and over, and now I'll come back into the image, click here, and click right here to make that selection. And then what we'll do is we're going to click this button to fill. So I'll click it. You have contents. This is a drop down. It's set for black, which is what I want, but you can go 50% gray, white, but we want black. So I'm going to click OK. The area inside the marching ants got filled with black, which is what I want. A Gaussian blur comes up. The radius is at 0.1, no feathering. I'll just click OK. It's missed this little piece right here. Not a problem. Click on your black brush and paint it off just like so. Very easy. Now we've selected red. I want to select yellow. Click on the calculator button. Click plus to add because I want to add yellow in. Now let's come back and click on the color mask button and let's target a yellow tone like right here. Click OK. And again, I could lighten this brightness slider, but I'm not. I'm just going to click on the levels adjustment button. If you double click it, it's an auto adjustment, but I want to make my own adjustment. And in the properties panel, you can see there's my levels adjustment. And I'll take the highlight slider and I'm going to drag this to the left over to right there. And that's a 152. I'll take the midtone slider and we'll drag it to the left and I'll take it over to right there, 1.16. And let's take the shadow slider and I'm going to pull this one in and I'm going to take it into like right around there, like 52. And I think that is going to be good. When I pulled this shadow slider to the right, it made sure I had no areas selected in here and here. Now that we've added yellow, we need to complete the calculation by clicking the equal button. And now there's our red and there's our yellow. And now we need to output this. I need to output this to a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to click this button right here. And now here's my hue saturation adjustment layer with that mask on it. And now let's make the adjustment. I'm going to take the saturation and I'll start to drag it to the right, but it's only going to be affecting red and yellow. So here I go. I'll start to drag it to the right and I'm going to take it over to right there, plus 35. And now for lightness, I'm going to take the lightness slider and drag it a little bit to the right, not too much. I'm going to take it over to like right there, plus 2, plus 3. Let me shut off this layer and look at the yellows and the reds. Here is before and here is after. Pretty cool, right? Now you might say, you know, Dave, you could have just used the hue saturation adjustment layer and do this, but I really couldn't, and I'll show you why. Let me shut this off. I'm going to go ahead and add another hue saturation adjustment layer. I'll click the target adjustment tool, click and drag to the right to increase red saturation. But see what's happening over here? It's bringing reds up here, and this looks very ugly, and I don't like that. So I could bring the reds up, and then I could come and click on the yellow and bring up the yellows. And now we can see these ugly greens in here. This just looks horrible. So this is just not acceptable. So this mask calculation, which wasn't hard to do, I'm going to shut this layer off. Let's turn this hue saturation layer back on where I use the mask calculations, and that is so much better. Let me shut this layer off. Here's before. Here's after. Really great. Now, practice with layer mask calculations, and I know you're going to take your photo editing to a whole new level. Once you can wrap your head around it, you know, watch this video as many times as you need to. Look at the PDF notes, practice, download these stock images, try this out, and I'm sure This will pay great dividends if you do it. Well, there it is, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you want more of these type of tutorials, let me know in the comments section below. Hey, if you enjoyed today's tutorial, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe. Click that bell notification icon. Click all so that you'll receive all notifications, and then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll get notified about it. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. I'll see you all right here next time, but until then, happy editing.